Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, December 3rd, 2020. Time for another show. Time for, I don't know what we're going to do today. Pile up all the crazy things that are happening as Republicans in Donald Trump's thrall continue to pretend that there's reason to believe that the election should be contested, much less that it should come out the other way. But that's where we are. And a curious mix of news and happenings in the last day or so, like, for instance, the pandemic is still with us. And as a matter of fact, we broke all records for the number of new deaths reported yesterday. Yesterday was the deadliest day so far of the pandemic here in the United States, which I think probably means that it was just the deadliest day for the pandemic, certainly in any country, anywhere around the world, as we have the most deaths going on just in terms of raw numbers, though there are others who exceed us in per capita numbers. But I've seen various reports, and I guess it depends on whose statistical aggregator you're looking at, but I've seen, my impression from the one I tend to follow, which is Worldometers, was that it was about 2,800 plus people, new deaths yesterday. They count a little funny in terms of where they, where the line falls between days, because it's an internationally oriented counter, and they like to break things off at midnight, which makes some sense. But midnight, I think GMT, not Eastern Standard Time or any of our own time zones. So that sometimes accounts for the difference in discussions between the statistical aggregators in terms of what happened on what day. But then there's also the question of where they aggregate their statistics. What are their sources for their aggregated statistics? We have that tension between them and the Johns Hopkins counters, etc. So I've seen others peg the number, at least in discussions on Twitter, at over 3,000 yesterday, which is not outlandish given that Worldometers had landed on 2,800. I guess what's really outlandish, though, is that all of this is happening, and while we appear to be at a new peak in the pandemic, and here we are, allegedly anyway, just days or perhaps a few weeks away from the beginning of the distribution of some effective vaccines against the virus, yet here we are at entering into another peak. And of course, there's nothing we can do about all the people who've gotten themselves infected in the last week or so since Thanksgiving. But at any rate, this is the point at which I would think the President of the United States ought to have his eye on the ball and be concentrating on this stuff. But it isn't, because your president, if you consider him to be your president, or if anybody should, I don't know, but your alleged president spent his day yesterday at the new peak of the pandemic making 45-minute lunatic Facebook videos about how he didn't lose the election and everybody else is at fault and everybody should basically get out of his way and we should have 4 more years of, his neglect that's killing, approximately a 9/11's worth of Americans every day at the moment. So please, couldn't everybody just concentrate on that? And I'm not exaggerating. Those numbers are real. And yes, he really did post a 46-minute rant on Facebook. I guess he did. I don't know whether he streamed it out via Facebook Live. Is that how? I don't know. It doesn't really matter what the forum of choice was. But of course, pointing out that it's a lunatic rant on Facebook just makes it that much cheaper and cheesier. In the meantime, his free lawyer, who said he wanted $20,000 a day not long ago, and I don't know whether he's getting it or not, was in Michigan at another fake hearing in a hotel somewhere. They really love, and by the way, the fact that he's had, let's see, they had their field hearing in Gettysburg. Was it at the Wyndham Hotel there? And then this one was at, I don't remember which one it was, but one of the brand name hotel chains in in Michigan. Because these aren't official hearings, though they include state legislators. Even the Republican state legislators in control of those houses wouldn't allow, I guess, any official site in their capital to be used for these stupid hearings. So they rented out another hotel, and like I was going to say, in case there was any doubt in your mind about how they ended up at the Four Seasons Total Landscaping, note that in every one of these cities, they rent out one of the brand name high-end hotel ballrooms, I guess, for their stupid hearings. And there's no sense in which they meant to be at Total Landscaping, a Four Seasons Total Landscaping outside of Philadelphia. So forget that if you ever entertained that notion. But anyway, he was in Michigan yesterday. Seems like star of the show on Twitter anyway from this appearance in Michigan was what, again, by all appearances and Twitter commentary, appeared to be a drunken blonde bump it lady from Michigan who says she was a poll watcher and basically knows everything there is to know about elections, and everybody else is an idiot, and she'll set you straight. But she did in fact appear to me to be intoxicated, and there were some interesting exchanges as between her and some of the panel of questioners among the Republican legislators who sponsored this non-hearing hearing. And it was really quite remarkable. I don't think that he did himself any favors there. I guess the second most circulated clip of the Giuliani fake hearings yesterday would have been another PR coup. The brief clip of Giuliani presenting his case, I guess his case in chief, to the off-duty legislators. And I don't know whether it was Jenna Ellis sitting next to him or somebody else. I didn't recognize who it was sitting next to him as co-counsel, perhaps. Anyway, like I said, the second most popular circulated clip was of Giuliani ripping a fart during this presentation. And, just continuing on as though nothing happened, which, what would you do? I mean, perhaps you might do it under your breath, kind of, pardon me, I don't know whether you would let it go. Or maybe sometimes the best policy in that situation. Well, one would be take care of your gastrointestinal system and make sure everything's settled before you do this. But if you're really nervous, let's say, and you're faking a hearing and trying to overturn a presidential election, that would cause a case of nerves. But he had nothing to say about it, so he plowed right by it. But everybody was focusing on the woman sitting with him at the table, noticed, and didn't much appreciate the idea of that happening, and gave him some good old-fashioned family values Republican Heartland America side eye for having done this. So it's been a hell of a day. I also will note, just for the record, we might discuss it, maybe not. Another crazy person who, in the alternate reality, where the Trumpers live, which is invading our reality day by day and polluting it, of course. But in the alternate reality in which we don't have to deal with the corrupt practices of Donald Trump, imprisoned lunatic Roger Stone, now pardoned and free to be a lunatic outside of prison walls, has solved the election interference question for Rudy Giuliani. I don't know why they are all poking around trying to figure out how it was done when Roger Stone knows, because he has incontrovertible evidence, apparently, according to Newsweek, that is to say, according to Newsweek's transcription of crazy, non-incarcerated idiot Roger Stone's telling of it, incontrovertible evidence that the North Koreans smuggled in fake ballots for Biden through a little-known, little-used port in the state of Maine. Bill, I want you to check that one out for us and make sure it all stands up. But anyway, he just wanted everybody to know that he has incontrovertible evidence. And he went on to say, if it checks out and law enforcement looks into it, then everybody will figure it out, which is not really, the if it checks out part is not compatible with the idea that it's incontrovertible evidence. It's incontrovertible evidence has been checked out and cannot be controverted. Wrong word there, but he's prone to that sort of thing. But I had no idea that it was the North Koreans, and we'll accept that, I think, going forward. And why not? It seems totally non-crazy, and he dresses like a cartoon character, so it seems to make sense. Greg Dworkin is here dressed normally, just saying normal things that can be proven with observable phenomena. So I don't know whether we should believe that guy or not, but let's give him a forum. Greg, good morning. You want to testify to our fake hearing here today? He does, but we can't hear him. So are you muted, Greg? Do we need to reestablish our connection? I guess we probably do. Dang, I see your mute button going on and off here. So how would I rate the quality of this call? I'm going to give that can't give a 0 star. So I'll send a 1 star. And now I have to answer why. This is why we can never do call feedback. Okay, let's try it this time. Good morning, Greg. How are you? Oh, no. This too is not working. It's ringing.
How about now?
Yes, that's it. That must be the button we
good.
were looking for. Did they move the mute button on your microphone today?
Yeah.
I knew it. The North Koreans.
Abby was greeting the neighbors, and I had it turned off, so it's on now.
I get you. Well, that's fine. Hello, Abby. Did you cheat in the election?
She voted 3 times.
Excellent. Well,
Yes.
you're allowed to do that if you are a Calcan dog.
She voted for Rin Tin Tin once and Lassie twice. It was a write-in.
Okay. Well, I think it's permissible. I find no problem
the funny
with this.
thing, though,
I'll
is
ask
that
Bumpet
Lassie
Lady
won.
what she thinks. Oh, yeah? And she's contesting
It's a
the
local
race?
election, so, these things matter. Everybody has a dog.
You guys vote in cardboard boxes. Who knows
I
what
was
happens?
thinking about that Fox yesterday that I
That's a better
sent you.
subject. Yeah.
Sent everybody on Twitter. That fox, which was curled up and sleeping on my lawn,
Yeah, right out in the open.
was doing it despite the fact that every one of my neighbors, and of course Abby here, everybody
Yes.
has a dog,
Yeah.
and the fox just didn't care.
That's what they say about foxes. I don't know. I'm saying it. I was surprised. There was not even, ordinarily I would have thought the fox would curl up in some sort of sheltered spot, perhaps on your lawn.
Right in the middle of the lawn, trying
Yeah.
to get some sun.
Like, okay.
It wasn't a long nap. It was a little fox nap. It took about a minute, but it was nice to see. I mean, if you're sheltering in place because of the pandemic numbers, then that's what happens. And of course, this morning trying to organize how we're going to do the show today.
By the way,
I couldn't decide
Greg's
whether
working
to do
Fox
the pandemic
News.
first or politics first. So I think I'll do it the way you did it. You started with the pandemic and then phased into politics. So why don't we do it that way?
Yeah. It was very carefully planned. So.
Yeah, as your shows often are. So we're going to start with the difference between the COVID tracking project, the one I use,
Yes.
and Worldometers, the one you use,
Yeah.
is only about 100 deaths. And the reason I like
Okay.
the COVID tracking project is, for example, and the
smart
very,
or
very
something?
last thing in the long double list of things I sent you this morning is U.S.
Double.
daily deaths on the COVID tracking project. So they look at a chart, which online at least you can hover over and see the numbers on. And yesterday's numbers for them was 100 less. As I said, it was 2,733 deaths, the highest number it's been since May 7th, when it was 2,769, when New York was having its issue. So we're going to pass that, and we're going to pass that rather soon. Might even be today. We'll see. The other thing that the U.S. daily deaths as the COVID tracking project lays it out is you can clearly see whenever there's a little dip, like on November 29th, because of holidays and reporting issues.
Yes.
It's not that it eased up and then all of a sudden sprang back into action. It's that over the holidays, people stopped reporting.
Yeah.
And you can see that very clearly on the graph when
Is
that
he getting
happens.
COVID? Yes.
Yeah. So CDC does it a little differently, and I have a CDC tracking chart, which is generally used to gauge the effect of flu season. But as you can see, the not the flu is a whole lot worse. And what they do is they look at the seasonal baseline for pneumonia, influenza, and COVID-19 mortality from the National Center for Health Statistics Mortality Surveillance System. And for 2017, 2018, 2019, 2018 was a particularly bad season for flu mortality. But generally, it's more or less within the baseline of what you would expect, with more in winter, less in summer, that kind of variation. 2018 stands out because it was a little bit of a bad flu season there. But 2020 just is like almost off the charts.
Yeah, well,
You can always make it on the chart by adjusting the
Right.
the axis there. But it's just a phenomenal rise in mortality. And so this is from CDC, which is about a week behind. And CDC is always a week behind as they carefully collect the data from all of their public health partners. But it's a clear piece of evidence that, no, this is not just the flu. You can just see how different it is from flu because it's all on the same chart.
Right. Okay. Well, I get it. I get the visualization is nice. We'll share that with everybody. You tweeted it around. We'll include it in our roundup today. But it's quite clear to me. I see what you're talking about. Giant red spike over 2020, and two little spikes after.
Yeah, well, you could see the April rise, and then you could see the rise in the middle of the year, and now you can see the fall rise as it goes everywhere. The middle of the year was the Midwestern spike. But, people are reacting to this, obviously, in a very, very politicized way, which is bad. And it's not just the Midwest. It's not just Sturgis. On Staten Island, there was a flashpoint yesterday.
Oh.
And again, for people who don't know New York, there are 5 boroughs in New York City. Staten Island is the conservative borough and generally leans Republican, whereas all the others lean heavily Democrat. And there was a bar and grill there which declared itself an autonomous zone and said, we don't have to follow any regulations. And the owner said, I'm doing this because I just want to attract people's attention to the fact that this pandemic restriction stuff's killing us. I invested all my money in this bar. I just opened it up last year. And if people can't go out and dine and drink and do the things that, are supposed to happen in my establishment here, then I'm going to lose all my money.
Well,
and I'm like everybody else in the country, and I don't want to shut down, and I just want to draw attention to this. So after flouting the rules in New York, after, you're supposed to have a curfew, and you're not supposed to have indoor dining, you're supposed to limit this, you're supposed to limit that, and they did none of it and flouted it, so they arrested him.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened is that the people in Staten Island said, we're going to have a protest. So what happened is supporters rallied outside, thousands of them, after Cuomo mandated a 10 p.m. curfew at bars. So this is a place called Mac's Public House, a tavern on Staten Island. And thousands rallied outside. So the pictures, and I'm not sure, there is one. A large crowd gathers in front of Mac's Public House to protest the shutdown on Wednesday night. So you had, basically it looked like a Trump rally.
I see.
And, that was New York. In New Orleans, here's a piece from NOLA.com. After Swingers Convention in New Orleans, 41 test positive for coronavirus, organizers say. And the Swingers Convention, which happens every year there, they tried to be careful. They actually had wristbands, those who were positive and those who were negative, on testing as they came in. And so you could tell right away who was infected and who was not. And I guess the idea is the infected people swing together and the non-infected people swing together, so it's safer.
What do you think?
No? Well, it's an attempt to, do something. Something's better than nothing. The problem is not that. The problem is by the last day, everybody said, we've been good for 2 or 3 days. Today's the last day of the convention. The convention's called Naughty in New Orleans. And usually about 2,000 people go, but this year was only about 250. And by the last day, they said, to hell with it. We'll just swing with anybody. And so that's really where the problem happens. And so those two things together are kind of, in a nutshell, how a lot of America is fatigued with instructions about what to do about coronavirus. When you have officials who are egging this on, it only gets worse, of course. But you have people who are trying. I mean, the Naughty New Orleans people were trying, and then they sort of gave up because, I can't sustain it for that long. And you have the people who truly, for economic reasons, don't want what they call shutdowns. They're not really shutdowns. They're restrictions, but they call them shutdowns. And the people who support them call them shutdowns and or lockdowns, and the government officials call them lockdowns. And so that's one of the major reasons why this past election that we had a month ago wound up the way it did. You'd think the pandemic and people dying all over the place and the threat of people dying in future, which is happening now, would be enough to say, I don't want the guy who's in charge of this, who's completely abandoned the idea of doing anything about it. But the other forces that are playing into how people think and therefore how they vote is that, I sympathize with the bar owner and my small business is being affected too. So how can I vote for a Democrat who wants to take money off out of my pocket and take food off my table?
Yeah, okay. I can understand the concern.
Right. It's a concern. Now, is it fed by misinformation? Absolutely. And will that change if everybody in your town kind of like dies and your hospital collapses? Maybe.
Yeah.
So timing is everything in politics except when it's location. And, when you're talking about I'm needing to open my business now because I'm hurting versus in 2 months from now, a lot of people are going to die. And I sort of know that. But the election's next week. Then you're going to vote your pocketbook issue and not your long-term, risk assessment, because we all know humans are not very good at that.
Yeah, 2 weeks long-term.
2 weeks is long-term. 1 week I get. A couple of days, I know what's going on now. Election's today.
Yeah.
So you look at the Staten Island situation, you say, okay, I sort of get it. I understand where they're coming from. It's wrong, but I get it. I was happy to see that the cops who went to break up the rally were all wearing masks, which is good because New York City cops don't always do that, but at least in this particular occasion they did to make a point.
Okay, that's nice.
So that's all good. So, I just want to make sure that your public service announcements are all in tune with what's going on here. A little bit more to talk about that, but I was passing around this sign because I just thought it was so wonderful. It's a picture of a hand sanitizer, and the sign says, please Satanize your hands here, Satanize.
Aha.
So,
that's what Mitch McConnell did.
Humor there. And I think that, it's important to keep in mind that, it all really does matter. Now, the vaccines are going to be rolling out. And I have one story about this, but a bunch of stuff I've seen that I don't have stories about. And that is the whole idea of how you get the vaccine as depoliticized as possible. Okay, Jonathan Bernstein has a story about this. Biden needs to depoliticize vaccinations. Many people are still unsure about the new shots. An nonpartisan campaign to get them on board is essential. So you have George W. Bush say he'll get the vaccine, and Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, and perhaps you do that together. It's important also for Biden to keep praising Trump for all the wonderful things he did with Operation Warp Speed, in order to make sure that Trump voters understand that this is a Trump operation, and therefore you should get your Trump vaccine because it's good for you. And your guy got this done, and there's no reason for you not to do it. Now, if that happens to split the Trump people, fine, but you got to start somewhere. And Bernstein writes, President Donald Trump's a harder question. It's possible Trump will simply do a good job of positively publicizing the vaccine, but it's also possible he'll mainly sulk about not getting sufficient credit or even turn against it once he's out of office. So what should Biden do? Give Trump plenty of credit and do what he can to keep the outgoing president from undermining the rollout or turning his supporters against it. For one thing, Trump's Operation Warp Speed actually has done a decent job accelerating the vaccine development, regardless of how poorly the president has otherwise handled the pandemic. But even if the credit is fully undeserved, what matters is to get everybody vaccinated.
Well, certainly that does.
You just have to suck it up and and do the wrong thing for the right reason.
I guess
give
so.
Trump credit.
And it's a possibility that might be a good idea. I guess I'll say maybe the wording. Depoliticize, I think. It's okay. I object to it just because it was struck by. We need to depoliticize this by having George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Bill Clinton do this thing. Well, that's not going to help me depoliticize the thing.
Well,
but I get what you mean.
I mean, bipartisan is not depoliticization. Nonpartisan is, but you have to bipartisan it now because of everything that's been done. So it's not exactly the right word, but there is no word.
Right. There's no real word for what has to go on here. And besides which, we can, you know what? Biden can go and do this thing and praise him and talk about warp speed or whatever. And good. That's credit so that later when we prosecute him for other stuff, we say, we gave the guy a fair shake. Look at all the nice things we just said about him. He's a criminal,
years, but we'll give him 293 for good behavior for that warp speed thing. I'm okay with that.
Sure. Okay. So we'll take the chit.
We have stuff to talk about that
speed.
either. We'll probably do that after the break. This piece is from Stat News. With an intriguing thing. Think about Staten Island, which is going to be a hotspot of
that
COVID.
what Stat is?
Okay, yeah. A better way to roll out COVID-19 vaccines, vaccinate everybody in several hot zones. Right now, the thinking, the state public health thinking is, look, obviously you want to do your healthcare workers first, as well as people who are stuck in care facilities if you're over 65. I think in England they're doing like over 80.
Right, they're doing it in reverse.
But how about a different approach? And that is to say, why don't we do Sturgis? Why don't we concentrate on vaccinating Staten Island? It's not that big. Why don't we pick the hot spots and do that?
Yeah, bring it to the table. I mean, I'd like to talk about that one because it makes a certain amount of sense. My first reaction is I'm going to vaccinate the people who've done the worst job first. Well, how about people who've been working hard?
Again, you have to depoliticize it. This isn't a reward or a punishment sort of thing. Take the view of how you would get rid, in a public health sense, of smallpox in the world or polio. You go to the hot zones and you vaccinate the people there. You do what people used to call ring vaccinations. You get the person who's the original contact, then you get the people around them, then you get the people around them. If it spreads slow enough, then this ring vaccination concept might work. With flu, it doesn't work, or measles, because it spreads too fast. It's not clear it would work here. But if you designate an entire area, like Staten Island,
that's a big ring,
and wall them off from the rest of the city.
It's not even a ring. Yeah.
No, but anyway, if you did that, without the walling off, that might make more sense in terms of trying to slow the vaccine right now.
Yeah.
So that's an alternative. But I think the traditional: do the teachers, do the essential workers, do the healthcare workers, and do the oldest people. That probably is going to win out.
Well, we've been talking about that one for a lot longer, so there's a lot more support for that one out there. But yeah, bring it to the table. I'd discuss it, and it might make some real sense. And if they can't control themselves, then maybe we can help control the disease if they won't do it themselves.
Right. Bill Hartsberger points out Newt Gingrich joins the deep state. That's coming up after the break, because I got that one.
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show. You're on Netroots Radio. Let's roll straight into the second segment here. You said Newt Gingrich, and then you went away. What happened?
Well, I went away, but he didn't, unfortunately. So we'll get to him.
About that. Oh, all right. So
all right, we have to start
away for a little while.
With this amazing piece. From the Associated Press.
Oh.
Okay. Whereby the Associated Press basically says, this is really weird. Now all of a sudden my AP piece has decided to not load. Wherein it actually starts describing Trump's 46-minute rant.
Yeah.
In the starkest normal terms, and it's just odd that they would do that. As a matter of fact, Margaret Sullivan, among others, flagged that. Wow. Vivian Schiller has a piece here. It's been and although I can't get the AP piece to load, she's got a snippet of it that she screenshotted, so you could see it. What the AP says to start their piece. Yes. Increasingly detached from reality, President Donald Trump stood before a White House lectern and delivered a 46-minute diatribe against the election results that produced a win for Democrat Joe Biden, unspooling one misstatement after another to back his baseless claim that he really won. This is AP, mind you. Remember we used to call them the stenographers?
Yeah.
Trump called his address, released Wednesday only on social media and delivered in front of no audience, perhaps the most important speech of his presidency, but it was largely a recycling of the same litany of misinformation and unsubstantiated allegations of voter fraud that he's been making for the past month. Okay? So we saw that this morning. I said, I got to highlight this. Look how all of a sudden AP has turned into like normal reporting after Trump lost.
Yeah.
But I wasn't the only one to notice this. Vivian Schiller, who tracks social media for the Aspen Institute, says, it's been fascinating to witness news organizations abandon these last few weeks all remaining vestiges of norms used when reporting on a sitting U.S. president, warranted without a doubt, but should have started much sooner. And Margaret Sullivan, who is a media critic, of course, over at the Washington Post, used to be the editor Ombudsman for the New York Times. Yes, have thought the same post-election effect. And it was clear after Trump lost, all of a sudden they were free to say he's lying. They refused to say it beforehand. That's just one example. But that was, I just thought, a really interesting approach to trying to describe what Trump was doing. And AP went there and said, he's crazy. He's absolutely nuts. And he's lying, and it's ridiculous, and it's baseless. And yes, they should have been describing this from the beginning. If they had, perhaps we wouldn't be where we are today.
Yes.
So the Washington Post, Trump escalates baseless attacks on election with a 46-minute video rant. Philip Rucker's describing this one. Standing behind the presidential lectern in the diplomatic reception room and flanked by the flags of his office and of the country whose constitution he swore an oath to uphold, Trump tried to leverage the power of the presidency to subvert the vote and overturn the election results. The rambling and bellicose monologue, which Trump said may be the most important speech I've ever made, and was delivered direct to camera with no audience, underscored his desperation to reverse the outcome of the election loss after a month of failed legal challenges in some key states have already certified Biden's victory. Now, when Yamiche Alcindor was describing this on Morning Joe this morning, she pointed out the other thing about this, which was odd, is that no reporters were allowed. So we weren't allowed to ask things like, well, isn't this nuts? Aren't you subverting the election? Yeah. And by the way, what do you have to say about the 250 some odd thousand people who have died from coronavirus and the 2,700 who died yesterday? There was no reporters able to ask him that because they weren't allowed in.
Right. Well, it was a Facebook thing,
Well, but people gloss over that. Oh, he just delivered it to Facebook. Well, he also did it in a bubble, in a hermetically sealed environment where reality was not allowed to impinge.
That's Facebook.
So, that's as president, you're supposed to treat me like this is a national address.
Yeah, right. The most important
Instead,
speech.
You're treating me like, your crazy uncle who rants on Facebook and you already blocked them.
But you are.
So Philip Bump in the Washington Post describes it as the most petulant 46 minutes in American history. And no, I'm not going to repeat anything he said there because it's all BS. I was struck by this Molly Jong Fast piece in the Daily Beast. I love the title. The three strains of the GOP, crazies, quiets, and hostages. And yeah, they all suck. And then the subheading for this is called Pitiful.
Okay.
In the twilight of Trumpism, Republicans have shown no more backbone than they ever have, and most, of course, are worse than spineless. They are worse because they're abetting this, right? Yeah. And how you can do this in many ways. Yes, there are heroes that stand up, and we should applaud them. This Krebs fellow from DHS, for example, the one, from Homeland Security.
Oh, yes.
Who was, basically attesting to the fact that the election was kept going in a normal fashion and, in fact, reflected exactly what happened.
You mean what Bill
Barr
suppose
said. You could even quote patriots like Bill Barr, who said the same thing.
Right. USA, America.
USA. So, there's that. But the people who refuse, like Rob Portman, to acknowledge that Trump is president, or as we went over the show yesterday, Ron Johnson, who knows it's BS but is afraid that it's political suicide to actually tell the truth, is bad. And that's what aids and abets those large gatherings in Staten Island. and the crazy behavior that you see, in all sorts of different large parties that shouldn't be going on, and so on and so forth. So then there was the Michigan piece, as you pointed out. There were a couple of different witnesses that were brought in by Rudy Giuliani who were just stone cold crazy. There was a person who purported to be a Dominion company, the voting booth, the voting poll company.
Yes,
but who was a consultant for them, who knows that it's all fraudulent. And who did seem to be semi-inebriated when she was presenting and kept challenging the Republicans in the Michigan legislature.
Yeah, you'll see that on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, exactly. Is this Saturday Night Live was one of the posts that I have here. And it's not funny anymore. I mean, it's she's literally challenging
Saturday Night Live.
You saying the polling books have the wrong number. I'm telling you, she says, all the people there are either dead or they don't exist, and you're changing the numbers as we go along to fit your fantasy here. As somebody, I think Ryan J. Riley tweeted, this is basically a Karen with the incredible amount of entitlement and confidence to go up there and say, I know what I'm talking about, you all don't.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you that this is all fraudulent, and every one of these people on the rolls is dead, and go ahead and check me.
Yes. Why not?
Why not?
Go ahead.
So you have that. But that wasn't the only thing that happened at that. Here's another one. I have to find the Ted Lieu follow-up to this. But there was another one of the witnesses at this thing, and I'm going to just quote it because it's disgusting, so I have to.
Okay.
She says, she's trying to make a pitch that you need voter ID because all these elections are fraudulent. And she says, I think Chinese all look alike. How can you tell? If some Chow shows up, you can be anybody and you can vote. This is one of Rudy Giuliani's witnesses yesterday insisting there has to be voter fraud in Michigan. And Ed Lieu, who's Asian American, says, look, first of all, if you want to say that I look like Bruce Lee, fine. I can do with that. Cool.
Sure.
But secondly,
hey, me too.
If you're telling me that the solution to this, that all Chinese look alike, the solution is to have voter ID, we all look alike in the photo because racists are not only racist, they're stupid.
Huh. Well, that's a good point. I mean,
how is voter ID going to fix this supposed problem? I mean, that just sort of takes it seriously when you shouldn't take it seriously, but obviously racism is serious. But it's incredible that, again, they had the chutzpah to have these people show up and say this stuff in public.
Yes.
And say, this is our evidence.
They didn't check who they were and what they were going to say, I don't think. But it's no excuse, obviously. I'm not certain that finding out ahead of time would have changed their minds.
Michigan has voter ID. But that's besides the point.
Oh, it seems to be exactly the point, though. But all right. Yeah, we need to have voter ID so that this can't happen. Okay, poof, you have it. And magically you had it this time. But
then go back to the first drunk lady who says, but they were all dead, so it doesn't count.
All dead people look alike.
Right. So meanwhile, Sheldon Adelson, who's a huge Republican donor, owns a newspaper, and his newspaper says, quote, the president does a disservice to his more rabid supporters by insisting he would have won the November 3rd election absent voter fraud. That's simply false, end quote. So he's lost Sheldon Adelson here.
That's good.
And he's going to start to lose the funders, which is really the important point here, because Sheldon Adelson is like the last person to jump ship when it comes to funding Republicans.
Yeah, well, the election's done.
A lot of the other normal donors also would jump ship. So that's, what's happening nationally. And, of course, Georgia has the runoff, so that's more important than a lot of the other states in regard to how this is happening now and affecting the individual Republican parties in the individual states. Tensions in Georgia, GOP rise over Trump, says The Hill. Tensions between Georgia officials and Republicans in Washington have been rising for weeks, but they came to a head Tuesday, that would be 2 days ago, when Gabriel Sterling, the state's voting systems manager, I think I mentioned this on the show yesterday, lashed out at Trump and his supporters for their sustained assault on the integrity of the election, accusing them of tacitly encouraging threats against both high-level state officials and low-level election workers. This has to stop. We need you to step up. And if you take a position of leadership, show some. I'm talking about Perdue and Loeffler, two people who I still support, but they need to step up. And Brad Raffensperger agreed. And one GOP political consultant in Georgia said it's pretty shocking to see. I was not expecting that. It certainly makes things more difficult for Loeffler and Perdue. On the one hand, Trump's ongoing criticism of Georgia Republican officials and attacks on the state's election system have stoked fears among some. He may be dividing the GOP. And on the other hand, Trump's refused to concede, and an acknowledgement of his loss by either Loeffler or Perdue could be interpreted by the president's supporters as an act of disloyalty or betrayal.
Right.
And so Trump now is going to a rally in Georgia, I think on Saturday.
Okay.
The Georgia that's closest, the part of Georgia that's furthest away from Atlanta and closest to Florida, because that's where he's most comfortable.
Far from the CDC and close to the super spreaders.
You know, what do you have? Now you have Newt Gingrich. Remember, I promised I was going to bring Newt into it. So he tweets this morning, Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell, who are two of Trump's ex-attorneys, or claims to be Trump's attorneys, but how do you really know?
Right.
Who say that real Republican Americans in Georgia should boycott this election because it's so fraudulent. How can you possibly know who's going to win?
Yeah.
Because they use Dominion machines and this, that, and everything else. So Newt tweets, Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell are totally destructive. Every Georgia conservative who cares about America must vote in the runoff. Their don't vote strategy will cripple America.
Oh, well.
Obviously, the first response to that is, oh, so the deep state got to you too, Newt.
Well,
that's my friend out who's
through the Vatican.
Being a little sarcastic, but you get the point there.
Yeah.
Washington Post version, Trump roils Georgia's GOP as party waits to see if presidential visit helps or hurts in crucial Senate runoffs. And so everybody's saying, well, Trump will just go down there and endorse him, so it's all going to be a wash in the end, and everybody will do what they're told. Nuh-uh. I don't think that's how it's going to work down there.
Well, that would be interesting. I'd love to see. Wouldn't that be something to see people at the? I mean, it won't happen this way, but at the rally saying, he endorses them. Boo! The election doesn't matter. Why you?
We shall see. At the center of it all, says this story, is an embittered lame duck president who's furious with some Republican leaders in Georgia for not helping him overturn the election, and has often been less interested in GOP efforts when they do not benefit him. So again, the important subtext of all of this, is that Trump has not conceded, that he's still fighting this election. It's all fantasy. Nobody's telling him the truth. He really is wandering the White House in his bathrobe talking to the portraits. And since nobody will cover him like in the normal way and let him do the normal things, he'll go on Facebook without reporters in his bubble and then talk to his supporters about how bad everything is.
I don't know.
But the thing is, he had an actual presentation. He had 46 minutes worth of material, and maybe only 20 of it was riffed. He had charts.
Yeah. Oh.
He had talking points. In other words, his staff was helping him do this.
Right.
Those assholes. And so everybody in the White House who's letting him do this, helping him do this, all needs to go where he needs to go, which is out.
Oh, hell, I thought.
If not the jail.
Okay. Well, they really do need to have a check on at some point. Yeah, the people who are aiding and abetting this, I mean, I don't know.
And that's always been the issue, right? It's not Trump. Everybody knows who Trump is. He's the same person we said he was 4 years ago when he ran. Those of us who were from New York know him.
Yeah.
He's no different. We told you this is who he was and this is who he is.
Well,
but there were people who said, okay, I'll buy into that for my own reasons, power, or because I want money, or because I'm a has-been and I never will. And so I need him like Rudy Giuliani needs him, and so they glom onto him in order to get what they can for whatever time is left. And those are the people, and those are the obvious ones. But the Byron Yorks and the Hugh Hewitts and the so-called respectable conservative media people, the NRO folks for a long time, who buy into this and support him, whether they do now or not, really almost doesn't matter anymore. He's lost, and so all of a sudden, well, I never really liked him. That's what NRO says. But Hewitt and York haven't abandoned him yet and still find excuses for why he's right and how the Russia probe was all nonsense. And that's still going on. So those are the people who are going to, I think, look the worst when all of this is over. By the way, Speaking of Georgia, here's one from the New York Times, just came out yesterday, 2,596. No, those aren't deaths from COVID. It's the similar number. 2,596 trades in one term inside Senator Perdue's stock portfolio.
Yes.
The Georgia Republican stock trades have far outpaced those of his Senate colleagues and have included a range of companies within his Senate committee's oversight, an analysis shows. Perdue's a crook. Loeffler's a crook. That's how Ossoff and Warnock will run against them. They need to make sure that Democrats are allied and aligned behind them, and Trump is splitting the GOP, and that's why, these are Senate seats we, in fact, could win. And it would be the funniest thing if they win those two seats, so you have a 50-50 Senate, and Susan Collins wanders over and says to Mitch McConnell, I need you to pass this, 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 and this, or I'm caucusing with the other side.
Yeah,
or Murkowski does it, or any senator does it. That's the way it's supposed
check
to
with
work.
us first. Yes, right. It could be.
Well, I'll do it as
helpful.
an independent.
Yes, or just say I'm going to start voting with the other side because I don't know if you want to caucus with us because I might still feel a locker.
The point is, stop sitting on all this stuff that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Make the Senate pass stuff the way it used to.
Right. I don't believe that Collins cares to do any of that, but certainly somebody must.
Well, Murkowski might.
And certainly there are things Collins wants. I don't know if it's to
exactly.
help anybody.
But I'm just saying, I don't have to go public with this. Just do this.
Yeah. They don't even really have to do very much, honestly, if it's a 50-50 Senate. But it'll certainly make things easier if people start wandering across the aisle. Sure.
That's something to watch for, but obviously too early to do that. We're not even at January 20th. That's a post-January 20th discussion to happen. Meanwhile, part of the discussion that's happening now is why is Trump's doing this? Is because he wants to stay out of jail. So this Eric Posner piece in the New York Times was of interest, and I'm telling you about it not because I necessarily agree with it, but at least he lays out the issues. Why prosecuting Trump is a very bad idea. The goal would be to renew faith in our government, but its effect would be the opposite. And if it's too long and you didn't read it and you don't want to read it, it's basically, look, there are things that Trump did, but if you can't necessarily convict him for it because it's just a shaky, tough thing, then don't go for it. And why is it a shaky, tough thing? It's not that he didn't do these things. It's that the entire structure of the law is based on two unequal situations. When it comes to individual rights, as a defendant, you really have to show without, beyond a shadow of a doubt, somebody did these things.
Yes.
But if you're talking about the power of the presidency, there's decades of people saying, well, the president can do this because, he's immune to this and he's allowed to do that, and pardon power is this, and, the president can set foreign policy and nobody's going to interfere with that, and yada, yada. So the imperial presidency has been set in stone for so long with so much precedent on the one hand, and the defendant's rights on the other make it very difficult to defend this, to prosecute this particular defendant because he's got two strains helping him stay out of jail.
Right. Although I guess that is all true.
That's the argument.
Yes,
right?
that is all true.
There's plenty of argument on the other side.
Right.
I'm not making the case that this is the definitive thing. We need another article about why you should, but at least it lays out why you shouldn't.
It makes an argument, and it's true. I guess I would only add, without I think diminishing the argument too. I would add a good footnote to this is, though, you should recognize that non-prosecution of things like this helps contribute to that growing gloss of legality that he's talking about building up over decades. You don't prosecute normal, balanced people who occupy the presidency ordinarily. So that helps too.
I'm from New York, and I'm thinking of the other original Dapper Dan, which is John Gotti.
Okay.
The crime boss.
Right.
And for a long time, you'd keep bringing charges, and he'd, be acquitted.
Yeah. It's one of the
that's
things that
because it's difficult to convict somebody when the system is set up to make sure that you have every chance to not get convicted unless it's really clear. So that just burnished his legend as Dapper Dan or
Teflon.
Things are Teflon Dan or things that you can't touch him. And that's bad.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's something that's real and you have to keep in mind. So if it's the idea is, well, if you don't prosecute him, he gets to skate and all these things. But if you do and you lose, sometimes it's even worse.
Yeah. I mean, you can certainly.
That was the argument for not impeaching him from the very beginning.
Yeah. And then they crossed that threshold. And so now that you're across it.
Sometimes you have to. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I can point out to you that you can impeach him again, and he doesn't have to be in office when you do it. Just, FYI, everybody. And yeah, that's one of the things you have to do is, and also, by the way, I mean, another good reason to take care of this in the forum of impeachment, though it's more difficult to get to a conviction, true, but you don't have the evidentiary problems that you have in the legal system.
Right. So, again, here's Posner. Prosecution would hit a constitutional wall. The president's constitutional powers over foreign affairs, for example, are by law and tradition nearly completely discretionary, or his pardon, or his self-pardon, or his pardon his kids. Let me throw those in. And on top of this, the Supreme Court has expressed skepticism of efforts by prosecutors to use bribery statutes to criminalize the horse trading, back scratching, and threats that are a normal part of politics and policy making. Well, how about trying to buy your way into a pardon?
Yeah, that might be a bit different.
That might be a bit different, but, it's not so easy.
No,
Blago wound up in jail. One of my former governors wound up in jail. But Virginia governor didn't.
Right. It was all normal for him.
It was all normal politics. So, again, it's not easy, I guess, is the thing that he's trying to put. Well, it's easy. He just did these things and well, it's not so easy.
No, I guess not. On the other hand, I think of Posner as a torts professor and not a criminal law professor. But, I'm sure he's plenty experienced. He makes a good point and makes the job clearer for whoever has to do it. So there is that. You got to war game these things, right? You got to red team it, and he's doing a good job.
But, the interesting thing is he concludes with the
that would be interesting. His conclusion, yes?
The Capone perplex.
Okay.
Investigations into allegations that Trump was involved in credit and tax fraud and campaign finance violations before his presidency, that's another matter.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Good.
But convictions based on such pre-presidential behavior won't reflect on his presidency nor hold lessons for future president. Of course it will. He was a crook.
No, come on. You're right.
And even these investigations run the risk of turning Mr. Trump into one of the last things we want him to be, which is a martyr. Nah. If Tish James nails him for the Trump Foundation being a crook organization that stole money from kids with cancer in order to pay their, Boy Scout dues, which, by the way, actually happened.
Right.
But on a larger scale, I don't think anybody's going to think that. They'll think he's a crook because he was a crook.
Yeah. Well,
so one of the things that happens in a trial, especially a public trial, is you get to lay out all the evidence.
Yeah.
And people see it. And that's really the point. And that was the point of prosecuting the impeachment, even if you didn't get to where you need to go. They laid out pretty well why what Trump was doing was wrong. And the reason that he wasn't convicted is because Republicans said, I don't care. That's not the same thing as laying out the charges for the public. So what I'm saying is you really have to be very careful about it. And I get the idea of why they did a narrow impeachment rather than a broad one, particularly with time constraints. But if you pick your narrow area, like tax fraud, campaign finance violations, or even bribery to
pardons, right?
And you lay it out really clearly, then go for it. But don't just do a smorgasbord. He did this, and I heard he did that. Now, the other side of the coin, Biden gets in, all of a sudden has access to the super secret computers and files with Trump's conversations on them, and finds out, you know what, Russia really did interfere and Trump colluded with them. Well, that's different too. And Posner doesn't know any of that. He's just assuming that everything we know is what we know. I'm not assuming that.
Okay. You write an article then.
Yeah, well, that's the thing.
I dare you. All right, yeah, well, you're doing this.
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not writing an article about that.
That's okay. You've done it here and laid it out nicely. Yeah, all right. Well, I mean, like you said, Posner puts together an argument. It's not insurmountable. It's just
right. If
it
you're
needs
going
to be
prosecute
surmounted.
him, then here's the reasons not to. So you better overcome those. That's how I'm reading this.
All right, I think that's a fair reading of it. I think he gives away the game a little bit at the end here. I'm just glancing over it, as he approaches his conclusion and says, essentially, blah blah blah. What would happen, and what if you prosecute, and if it doesn't, for these reasons, it wouldn't work out. That one of his paragraphs begins, "The Democrats cannot win. If they push forward, prosecutors may drop the case or narrow it down to nothing." And the mistake is at the top here. America doesn't win here if this happens. It's not a Democrat thing that the Democrats want him prosecuted. America needs him prosecuted. It's not a partisan question. And the fact that you concluded that way gives away a little bit too much, I think, in terms of Posner's own partisanship. But the point still stands. He has the wrong prosecuting authority in mind, and I think we can fix that we just did.
Right, and this is going to illustrate the problem, and since we're at the end of my hour segment here, at least this will be food for thought too. And this is an article about something completely different, and that's the economy. After the Biden win, nation's Republicans fear the economy ahead. Polling shows Republicans have turned bearish on the outlook for their family finances. In fact, there's a chart there that you could see that goes with it, that basically once Biden won, all of a sudden Republicans think the economy is going to hell in a handbasket, and the Democrats think the economy is getting better. But that's the degree of partisanship happening right now.
I guess.
So you got to pick and choose your fights. And sure, prosecute him for things that you can clearly convict him on. That's why I mentioned the Capone perplex. If you can't get him on murder, get him for tax evasion. But at the same time, nail him in the court of public opinion about his horrible handling of the pandemic with all the deaths, which is what we started this segment with.
Yes.
And there's no reason why you can't do those two things simultaneously.
I can think of no reason. And no reason why you shouldn't be pressing the issue on the pandemic right now. I honestly, looking at those numbers yesterday and then looking at how he spent his day.
And they're going to get worse. Yes,
Man.
And how he spent his day. He didn't mention the pandemic. That wasn't part of his rant.
Amazing that would happen. And, I think it's still legal to be talking about burning him in effigy. I think it's still okay to do, but I'm not positive.
Which state is effigy located in? That's a small city outside of Chicago, right?
That's right. I have several witnesses at the effigy Four Seasons to talk about it. All right, Greg, thanks very much. We'll catch up with you again next week. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. What's happening? Well, let's see. I took a quick break to do a number of things. Let's see. I checked up on worldometers again. And we're doing okay in terms of their validity holding up, even though there are other sources out there. They've been hovering. This is interesting. They're hovering at the brink of 280,000 total deaths reported here in the United States. Like literally at the brink. It's 279,999. So I guess that means it puts us over the 28,000 mark sometime very soon. By the way, if you've been following along on my tracking the number of deaths against the populations of some of the largest cities in America, let's see, at the moment are on the city of the lost here. That would be the the population of a city that is roughly equivalent to the number of people we've lost to the coronavirus is currently at the 74th largest city in America, Durham, North Carolina. After we go over the top of 280 shortly sometime today, and we may reach all the way up there, 282,011 is the estimated current population of Newark, New Jersey, the 73rd largest city in America. So just to give you some idea of what we're talking about. And as a preview, they'll stand, I think, alone for a little while at 287,000 is the next threshold at which we begin to see other cities occupying that spot. What's coming up? At the very least, it's also been an interesting geography lesson. There are some cities you had no idea that some of the cities that you thought of as smaller places in America were actually quite so large, and some of the large cities ended up looking so small. But next up, Irvine, California, A big one coming up in 71st largest, Orlando, Florida, 287,442 as an estimated population currently, and not far off, and probably, well, I guess tomorrow's the end of the week, but probably sometime around the beginning of next week, we'll be talking about having had Trump let COVID-19 wipe out the whole of Orlando, Florida. That seems like a tough thing to imagine. Did you know, though, by the way, that Anchorage, Alaska, larger than Orlando, Florida? I wouldn't have guessed that myself, but apparently true, although who knows what the actual population is at any given time, especially since such a significant portion of both are dying from COVID. So I suppose that'll change the numbers as well. All right, let's see. What other things have we got lined up for you for today? Gosh, there's a lot. And let's see. We'll make mention of the fact, though it's not a particularly exciting development, a lot of people were, titillated by it, I suppose. Ivanka Trump deposed on Tuesday, not as the nation's Evita, but as the defendant, or as a witness, I guess, in a lawsuit, that sort of deposition. I got very excited about the idea of deposing Trump, but wrong depose and wrong Trump. But anyway, this one is Ivanka deposed Tuesday as part of an inauguration fund lawsuit. I figured this was coming eventually. I think we covered it pretty closely at the time that the inaugural committees are a bit of a slush fund, and they're a little bit unregulated, and that I thought was an opportunity that the Trumps couldn't pass up to steal money, and I guess somebody else thinks so too and is suing about it. The suit claims, our NBC News subheader says, the suit claims the inaugural committee made improper payments to the president's Washington hotel during the week of the inauguration in 2017, because that's when the inauguration was. You get the idea. And I think the deal here is that the Trump hotel saw the opportunity to gouge people on pricing for parties during the inauguration celebrations, such as they were, and so they went ahead and did it. Now, on the other hand, that was inevitable. Trump was always going to do that, even though he was gouging his own supporters, and lots of his own supporters thought that they should support him for president because of all the money that either they or the country or both would save by having a supposed billionaire president who owned all this property. We would be able to have all these fantastic events and do them for free, and it wouldn't cost the government money, and it wouldn't cost anybody else any money because the billionaire president would pay for it, except he was a fake, and he's never going to pay for anything. He's also a cheapskate and loves stealing money from people, so it's going to be difficult to get past this. And on then the other hand, a lot of the rich donors eventually learned to virtually take pride in being fleeced by the president. It owns the libs. Oh my God, libs. The libs say he's ripping us off and we're voting against our own interests. And why can't we see that? Well, I'll own the libs. I can't wait to drink those liberal tears by allowing myself to be ripped off and then telling them I love it. And then they'll be so puzzled and frustrated. And I guess it's an approach. You could live that way, I suppose. I don't know for how long. Sheldon Adelson appears to have had enough of it. Anyway, let's see. The Associated Press uncredited article here. Although there's some contributors down at the bottom. They didn't byline this one, but okay. Here's the news. Ivanka Trump has been deposed by attorneys alleging that President Donald Trump's 2017 inauguration committee misused donor funds. A new court filing reveals. The document notes that Ivanka Trump, the president's oldest daughter and senior White House advisor, it's important too, was interviewed Tuesday by attorneys from the Washington, D.C. Attorney General's office. The office has filed a lawsuit alleging waste of the nonprofit's funds, accusing the committee of making more than $1 million in improper payments to the president's Washington, D.C. hotel during the week of the inauguration. Once again, they feel compelled to tell us that it was in 2017, but we knew that already, and they've already said it. So, okay, a little bit of editing work necessary there. As part of the suit, they have subpoenaed records from Ivanka Trump, First Lady Melania Trump, Thomas Barrack Jr., a close friend of the president, who chaired the inaugural committee and who's kind of a bit of a thief himself, and others. Barrack was also deposed last month. And, okay, where else were we on? Oh, yeah. Trump's inaugural committee spent more than $1 million to book a ballroom at the Trump International Hotel in the nation's capital as part of a scheme to, quote, grossly overpay. And I think they're right there. That is grossly overpay. $1 million to book a ballroom. To grossly overpay for party space and enrich the president's own family in the process, the District of Columbia's Attorney General Karl Racine alleges. He has accused the committee of misusing nonprofit funds, okay, and coordinating with the hotel's management and members of the Trump family to arrange the events. Ooh. District law requires nonprofits to use their funds for the stated public purpose, not to benefit private individuals or companies, Racine has said. In this case, it's self-dealing, by the way. In this case, we are seeking to recover the nonprofit funds that were improperly funneled directly to the Trump family business. The committee raised an unprecedented $107 million, you may remember that, to host events celebrating Trump's inauguration in January 2017. Again, thanks again. But its spending has drawn continued scrutiny. Ms. Trump's only involvement, Ivanka, that is, was connecting the parties and instructing the hotel to charge a, quote, fair market rate, wink, wink, which the hotel did. Said Alan Garton, of course is lying, a lawyer for the Trump organization, said in a statement, a fair market value for renting a ballroom in Washington, D.C. for a couple hours is not $1 million, and it's never going to be, especially not at a Trump property, piece of garbage that it is. Sure, but that's what he has to say as their lawyer. Alan Garton really is, as much as any of them, deserves to be in prison, but what can you do? It's zealous advocacy is what he's doing here. And, yeah, you may remember that they did raise an unprecedented amount of money. They say $107 million. And one of the strange things about it was there were less events, public and private, surrounding the inauguration, which, by the way, was in January 2017. I don't know if we've mentioned that. But less events there than have been at any modern inaugural, and of course less attendance as well. Everybody knows about that. So the question is, what happened to all that money? And I guess part of the answer is, if it supposedly costs $1 million to rent a ballroom, well then, I guess you'll eat through that inaugural fund pretty quickly after all. But a lot of peripheral issues swirling around this investigation. You'll recall, wasn't there the Melania's good friend who then went to work in the East Wing, the First Lady's offices in the White House? What was her name? She had three names. Stephanie, Worthington, Werther's Original Wolfington, or whatever the heck her name was. But I can't recall off the top of my head. We could probably Google it up and find out. But she was the party planner person who took over the umbrella operations, the accounting, and of the inaugural committee, and steered a whole chunk of the money, and apparently subcontracted everything out through her own offices, and then was immediately accused, once the heat started coming down on the Trumps themselves, immediately accused by Melania of having stolen all the money of her own volition, and it was really her fault. And there was a falling out, and she left the White House angry. She may have filed her own suit. She wrote a tell-all book, and I guess that might have led to some of the proceedings here that led to the deposition of Ivanka Trump. So very interesting. We'll see where that goes, and keep an eye on that. I understand Barrack also has testified, and there'll be a few others to go as well. Let's see. Let me also, while we have it fresh in mind, or relatively fresh in mind, the Michigan debacle that Greg was telling us about, I'll recommend to you an interesting thread kept by someone on Twitter here who, I'm not responsible for reading people's dopey Twitter names. I mean, mine is as dopey as anybody's. It always feels funny to have to read people's dopey names. Look for our tweeter here as Tepid Butter ASMR. And as I recall, isn't that the weird, those videos and audio recordings that people are crazy into for whatever reason that are like weird sounds and is a very sensory. Yeah, I think so. Anyway, Tepid Butter ASMR. Regardless of the crazy name, has put together a very interesting thread of all of the various lunatics who testified at this Michigan non-hearing hearing, and has done very pithy one-line summations. I'm not certain that the people in the videos would agree with the summations, but I agree with the summations because the people in the videos are crazy, of what it was that they were there to say. And it gives a great overview of just what sorts of people they had rounded up as witnesses here. I don't know if they did any vetting, but I don't know if it would have changed even if they had done vetting, because one, they're terrible at vetting, and two, the lawyers running the show are crazy and would probably gravitate to crazy witnesses too. So vet them all you want, you're basically going to get the same thing. And so you get a sampling like this. The first one in his thread doesn't have a screen grab of the person testifying, and I think that adds extra power to it to see the people. But you get things like this. Poll watcher in Michigan testifying that Black Lives Matter people wore rhinestones. That probably deserves some dramatic music. So they wore rhinestones, and apparently this was a problem for her. But these are the sorts of summations that this person is providing. There's another one here with a photo of a very heavily bearded older gentleman, gray beard, nice tie and suit and everything, although he looks a little Trumpy in it. But anyway, this man walked up, swore himself in. I don't know whether that was a self-service swearing in thing was the norm at this, or just he just figured, I'll do it, what the hell. Walked up, swore himself in, and he's talking about his internet radio show, which, I mean, come on. That's so stupid. But okay, but he goes on, by the way, to say that in his experience hosting an internet radio show, he saw the voting machines connected to a router. I have the same thing happen, as a matter of fact. Oh, look what I just saw. I just saw Trump take a bribe. What do you know? It was connected to my router. So let's have a hearing about that. And I'll testify. By the way, it goes on. I guess it turns tragic. He's now crying because he needs proof that the votes are valid, not that they were fraudulent, or they will not accept the results. Now getting applause. Okay. Not even sure what that means. There's another one here. The picture is provided underneath. It says, this is Dave. So this is obviously a message to me. Internet radio show, and then his name is Dave. So, this must be about me. This is Dave. Dave is struggling a little to get his story out. His proof of fraud is that they stopped counting at night, and in the morning when they restarted it, it was too quiet in the room. Well, I would hang somebody based on that evidence, wouldn't you? This is, I am sure, like I said, the witnesses would dispute these pithy one-line summations of what they have to say, but I think they largely reflect what actually happened here. Here's another one. Linda, who's a nurse, believes COVID is fake, except for that she then goes on to say she believes only a sneeze or a cough spreads COVID, which we just heard she thought was fake, so how would it spread it at all? But having a mask below your nose does not spread COVID. I don't know, all things that I guess she made part of her presentation on somehow on voter fraud. Holly was up next. Holly said there was fraud because she felt like the Democrat watchers were looking at her. So that should probably solve that would probably answer your question. By the way, I mean, would it, not that her accusation made any sense, but would it help you to know that Holly has purple hair? I mean, it may be that the Democrat watchers were looking at her, which I thought, generally speaking, people with purple hair, I assume, are, if not actively interested in having people look at their purple hair, don't care, at the very least, whether people look at their purple hair or not. But Holly does. So maybe she's just not cut out for the purple hair lifestyle, I guess. Anyway, next up was Robin, who said, never mind, actually, now that I read what Robin had to say. I remember this one, reading this one out loud at home yesterday and having to say, I have to lower my voice about what. Anyway, she refused to wear a mask correctly and was harassed at the counting. And so that's a problem for her. She followed up by saying ADA with no other explanation, which I think was her shorthand way of saying I don't wear a mask because I claim a disability. And if I claim a disability, the Americans with Disabilities Act protects me from having to wear a mask, which is a very common conspiracy theorist, Republican, MAGA, QAnon sort of theory. Anyway, it says here also she keeps going over her time, and everyone wants her to stop. But you get the idea. And it goes on for some time, and it's quite entertaining and just gives you an idea of what was going on at that hearing and what we're up against. And the fact that it gets the attention it gets is disconcerting, let's say, at the very least. All right. Here's a story that I hadn't picked up on, and this gives me a chance to take a brief pause from the microphone and to thank our listener and contributor, John Ronald, about this one. He sent to me a recording of him reading through this piece from Houston Public Media, although he'll tell you all about it. But I hadn't seen this story. This is kind of an interesting thing. I guess down in Texas, the counties have election administrators elected or appointed. I'm not sure. I guess appointed. Here we are. And independent election administrators appointed in each county. And I guess the rather corrupt attorney general, which is a problem anyway, really. But down in Texas, the attorney general, Ken Paxton, who's had his issues with ethics and corruption, apparently decided that he was going to do his best to force Harris County to get rid of its new independent election administrator. Let's see if the story clears up why. But anyway, just a good thing to keep an eye on, because I had no idea it was going on. And with so much crazy happening, it's easy to have these things fly under the radar. So thanks, John, for recording this. Let's roll that.
Hello, David. This
Hello.
story is from Houston Public Media, dated December 1st, 2020, by Andrew Schneider. Harris County won't withdraw its new election administrator despite threats from AG Paxton. Attorney General Ken Paxton has threatened to sue the county unless it withdraws the creation of the office and voids the appointment of Isabel Longoria. Harris County Commissioners declined to withdraw the county's newest appointed independent election administrator on Tuesday after Attorney General Ken Paxton threatened legal action over what he said was an improper appointment. Paxton and Secretary of State Ruth Hughes have accused county leaders of violating the Texas Election Code in creating the post, and in their appointment of Isabel Longoria, rendering both null and void. In a letter sent Monday, Paxton said the commissioners had 14 days to act or he would take the county to court. Commissioners met in executive session Tuesday with representatives of the Harris County's Attorney's Office and then declined to take further action, making a lawsuit all but certain. This summer, County Judge Lena Hidalgo and the commissioners voted 2-3 along party lines to create an appointed Office of Election Administrator, combining the election responsibilities of the county clerk with the voter registrar responsibilities of the tax assessor collector. Commissioner Rodney Ellis, a Democrat, said he was proud of the work the county had done in advancing what he called necessary election reforms. Ellis said that the previous arrangement of election and voter registrar powers held by elected officials was a relic of the Jim Crow era, and noted that well over 100 Texas counties have already created independent election administrators to take over those duties. Ellis also condemned Paxton's threat as part of a pattern of voter suppression, citing the Attorney General's multiple lawsuits prior to the election. Those included successful efforts to bar then Harris County Clerk Chris Hollins from mailing absentee ballot applications to all registered voters, as well as his successful suit to limit all Texas counties to a single mail-in drop box location. He added that he was confident the county would prevail in any new lawsuit that Paxton might bring. I think that the General's pronouncement that the Harris County Office of Election Administrator does not exist and calling Ms. Longoria's appointment void over administrative technicalities is just another blatant attempt to continue that assault on Texas voters, Ellis said.
Thank you, John, for that. For the bringing this to our attention. This is most disconcerting, certainly, and confusing. I like to keep an eye on this one. So a great contribution, I think, and those in Texas should definitely keep an eye on this. And it's clearly not something that Harris County came up with out of the blue, as he mentioned, astonishingly, over 100 counties, and the fact that there are over 100 counties in Texas. I don't know how many they've got. Quite a few. It's a big place, as it turns out, but over 100 counties have created a similar position, and it's a necessary reform, as at least as the one Democrat on the county, what do they have? The county committee, county commission had pointed out here. But yeah, I'm curious as to what the problem. I like to look further into it and see where usually there's a kernel of truth somewhere in even Ken Paxton's assertions, and I'd like to kind of find out what it was. But I guess he says that the process by which they appointed their election administrator was improper. But again, I guess this was done over the summer. And why he, at this point, insists that the appointment was invalid, I have no idea, outside of just, again, as they accuse him of furthering a pattern of voter suppression. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of excuse he comes up with for waiting until the election was held to end up complaining about this stuff. But okay, just another front on which the Texas Republicans, in this case, have opened up on looking for ways to expand their voter suppression, even as we seek to dismantle it post-election. So an important front on things. So let's see. Speaking of weird Republican voting shenanigans, saw some reports last night, including a tweet from Josh Marshall at TPM saying, "Oh, look, I found the voter fraud," and once again, it turns out to be Republicans involved in the voter fraud. Circulating the story by this morning, it was widely circulating. I have this local television report on it from WSB TV in Atlanta. As we know, the Georgia runoffs coming up. And as you might have guessed, you might even have suspected that this was going on. Yes, people nearby, particularly Republicans and particularly Florida Republicans, because Florida man always comes up with these things. And they, of course, share a border with Georgia. Wouldn't Florida man Republicans start advocating that they and others like them fake move to Georgia, so then you can register to vote there and vote in the runoffs and try and preserve Republican control of the Senate? And sure enough, yes, they were planning just that. And yes, sure enough, one dummy videotaped himself doing it, and then he tried to delete it from Facebook, but it didn't work and he got busted. Florida attorney under investigation for registering to vote in Georgia and encouraging others to do the same. The report here by Nicole Carr on what is the affiliate of? I don't know. But on WSB TV here, puts it this way. A Florida attorney is at the center of a new state investigation and it's a state investigation. You can't pardon him there, Mr. President. After elections officials say he recently attempted to register to vote in Georgia and instructed other Florida Republicans on how to do it. It was rather interesting. Bill Price is seen on a now deleted Facebook Live video speaking to the Bay County GOP members in Florida on November 7th. It was about half an hour after the election was called for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I gave it the Florida Republican pronunciation there by accident, just so I was in the character. But yeah, interesting. I didn't realize that half an hour after the election was called, this guy gives this presentation. Channel 2 investigative reporter Nicole Carr recorded the nearly hour-long video on Tuesday afternoon shortly before it was deleted. So good eyes, Nicole Carr, for grabbing the video. Price begins, good eyes for finding it, good thought for saving it. Price begins by sharing his legal expertise with the crowd, which is negligible, I guess I would say, if you make a video of yourself plotting elections fraud and urging other people to do it. Anyway, he tells them lawsuits challenging the presidential race are likely to fail. interestingly enough. I mean, he is competent enough as a lawyer to say, I'd love to tell you that there are legal avenues for success in the courts, but as a realist and a lawyer myself, I know that's just not going to happen, he said. But what he didn't know was going to happen was he was going to get busted. So instead, Price encouraged the crowd to work toward a, as he says, billion-man march. Well, that was never going to happen, but at the state capitol, and to show up in Atlanta on Election Day and move if they can do it. Which Election Day? I don't know. Why would you go there and pretend you were voting in Georgia? I don't know. But anyway, the heart of the matter is we absolutely have to hold the Senate, he says, and we have to start fighting back, and we have to do whatever it takes, Price says in the video, and that means changing your address for the next 2 months. If that's what it means, then so be it. And then he goes on to instruct people how to do it and how he did it. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Would you like to know how he did it? Not OJ, but how this guy Price, what was his first name? Bill Price down in Florida pulled off his particular election rigging scheme and encouraged others to do it. We were interrupted by the break, but now I'll give you the lowdown on it. He, after saying we got to hold the Senate and blah, 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 and we got to do whatever it takes. And if that means changing your address for the next 2 months, so be it. I'm doing that. Okay, you're busted. I'm moving to Georgia, and I'm going to fight, and I want you all to fight with me. And I would like the law to fight with you and for the law to win. Should write a song about that. Price told the group he's moving to his brother's address in Hiram, Georgia, in order to register to vote in the January runoff. He repeats and spells his brother's name and address as members of the group jot it down. That is interesting. They can be heard mumbling the address in the background while some write. And I thought that was kind of interesting all by itself. But because I thought, why would he, that's just more evidence and make it just that much easier for investigators to now go to that address and see, did you register? He did. Oh my God, this is fraud. But why share the address? Surely he didn't mean for everybody else at the event, at the Bay County Republican Committee meeting, to all move to his brother's address. But it appears from the balance of the article that he did mean that. but if you have your own address to move to in Georgia, another relative that you might have, go ahead and use their address. But I guess he was trying to tell them, he was so serious about all of them doing it, that if they didn't know anybody in Georgia who would loan them an address for fraudulently re-registering to vote in Georgia in time for this runoff, they could use his brother's place, which is just, well, dumb and more crime. And that's why it's so dumb. So, you hear people writing it down and mumbling the address as others write it down. And then one woman asks, we can truly register at that address? Sure, Price answers, incredibly, adding that they have to plan to show a move, suggesting that they have mail sent there. So he's essentially using his legal skills to try and help them come up with other quick and easy fraudulent cover stories for, trying to establish the legitimacy of their sudden 2-month move to Georgia, after which they quickly changed their minds after having elected the Senate representation. I guess they hope to elect their Senate representation for the state and then move back, leaving actual, real Georgians stuck with, they hope, 2 Republican senators that they didn't actually want while they skip back to Florida and live under the government that they once voted for in November. You get the idea, and of course you understand why it's unfair, but sometimes it needs to be spelled out. Anyway, so he says, yeah, sure, I guess if you don't have an address there, go ahead and register at my brother's place. And by the way, my brother's now going to jail, and he's really happy about that. And can it be anywhere in the state of Georgia you can register? Another woman asks. So if you've got cousins, dogs, cats, I think she's just joking here, that live somewhere else, it doesn't need to be one particular county. Which is an amazing question because these are people who are politically involved. They're from the Bay County Republican organization, whatever it is, and going to political meetings, and they don't realize, the whole state votes for Senate. Dummy. It's not just one county. But, okay, I guess it needed to be asked. Yep, Price answers, this is going to be a statewide election on January 5th. I'm going to be voting for Kelly Loeffler, and there's a question mark in this quote, which I think is explained by this parenthetical remark here. In the recording, his voice indicates a question as he mispronounces the senator's last name. So he might have said, I'll be voting for Kelly Loeffler. He doesn't know the name of the Republican he's voting for. He just knows this is just even more damning. Just knows that she's a Republican, and that's enough for him. It's not that she's especially inspiring to him, and he really believes she belongs in the Senate. I don't even know who she is. I'm just going to the other state to F around with them. And of course, David Perdue, whose name he gets right because chicken and or university. One woman also asks about the deadline to register in Georgia. Price said he's unsure. He would have to check, but offers advice on how to get it done online. But I guess if this is November 7th, it was well before the deadline, so I guess there's that. But he's a legal expert, except I haven't checked out any of the details. It can be done online, or you can request your ballot at your new address in Georgia by mail, Price said. You just go to the Secretary of State's website for the state of Georgia and register to vote there. So that would be Raffensperger, and I guess now we can test Raffensperger's medal. Is he just doing the bare minimum that needed to be done, or will he help root out these people and see them prosecuted? Anyway, if they need a driver's license, I'm going to get a driver's license, he said. If they need mail, I'm going to have mail there. We have to win that election in Georgia, and so I'm moving to my brother's house in Hiram, Georgia, and I'm registering to vote, Price says, and we're going to win that election in January. That's what needs to be done. If you don't want to do it, fine. Might as well move to Venezuela now, he said. Get used to that lifestyle, because that's what's coming. Anyway, when Carr reached Price by email Tuesday evening, he denied he was serious about the move. Thanks for reaching out. It was just a joke. I did not change my voter registration, and I don't have 2 million roommates, Price wrote, referencing a joke he'd told at one point during the talk about having millions join him in Georgia. But if my humorous comments bring attention to the massive and widespread real voter fraud in Georgia, I would submit to you that it's a good thing. I would submit to you that it'd be a good thing to put you in prison. But whatever. Anyway, but Channel 2 confirmed Price registered to vote the day after he made the speech, using his brother Hiram's address. His brother's Hiram address. His brother might also be named Hiram, but I don't think so. But he lived in Hiram. Using his brother's address and swearing to an affidavit that he was a Georgia resident and eligible to vote. Now, again, this is why it was so dumb. It was not necessary at all for him to tell anybody where he was going to be switching his address. But I guess, like I said, he was offering up people who might have the excuse of saying, I don't have an address of somebody that I know in Georgia who would be willing to participate in fraud with me. And he said, that's all right. My brother is willing to participate in fraud with you, and claim that, just dozens and dozens of people live in his house. So let's use that. So then he gives out the address for people who are, saying, I don't want to involve any of my other friends or relatives in this fraud, I guess. That's a nice thought. So he gives out the address. So how hard does the investigative reporter at Channel 2 WSB TV in Atlanta have to work to check out the fact check Price's statement? Not hard. He gave you the address. So check. Anybody registered at this address with this name? Yes? Well, he's a liar. At least they did the fact checking. That's good news. Well, anyway, so they have confirmed that, and he swore out an affidavit saying he was a Georgia resident and eligible to vote, when we clearly know that he is not, said Deirdre Holden, Paulding County's election supervisor. So I guess it's in the hands of the right authorities now. Holden said Wednesday that Price's voter registration is in pending status. Why not just say, yeah, you're out? But no, they're going to investigate this thoroughly. Okay, fine. Her office was preparing to write him and ask him to bring in his driver's license to, quote, cure and complete the registration, since the information was provided last month. Isn't that interesting? So they're going to take him seriously. And I mean, he'll go and he'll get the driver's license. So it sounds like Paulding County's election supervisor might be willing to be fooled in this case. I mean, I don't know whether the reporter has showed Holden I guess must have shown him the video, because look at this. This is pretty amazing. Again, the context, he swore out an affidavit saying he was a Georgia resident, and the reaction from the Paulding County election supervisor is, well, we clearly know that he's not. But if he brings us some, if he goes and gets a driver's license, I mean, I guess you might say, we can't say for sure that he wasn't joking, and maybe, I mean, what's the difference between someone who moves to Georgia, whatever, on an emergency basis, and they move to Georgia and they truly intend to be Georgia residents, but they're staying with their brother temporarily, and they go and they get their mail forwarded there and have their driver's license changed to that. They might be joking, but for right now, they say they intend to be Georgia residents, even though we have a videotape of them saying they're going to move right back. But that could be a joke, so I guess we register the guy. Ugh, amazing. He's a white guy, in case you were wondering. Anyway, by Monday morning, Holden had been contacted by state elections investigators who had flagged Price's Georgia registration address. They shared the video with her, so they saw it. And yet she's working to, quote, cure this whole thing. She said the elections board will hold a specially called meeting next week to make sure Price's registration does not become active. Holden, a Republican, told Carr, the reporter, that Price's intent was clear in the video, and it was disturbing to hear him instruct the group and say he planned to return to Florida on November 6th. Wow. Why November 6th? That doesn't make any sense. January 6th, I think, is what they might have meant. Because November 6th was a day before he made the video. Anyway, what kind of message is this sending out to our children and our grandchildren and our neighbors? That if you don't win an election, that you can just go out and steal one, Holden asked. That is the message. It sounds like you have a pretty good handle on it. And that's absolutely unacceptable here in the state of Georgia, unless you cure it, apparently. Carr stopped by Price's brother's home on Wednesday. He confirmed he'd been contacted by state investigators, but had not seen the video. Well, the whole thing was just tongue-in-cheek, Frederick Price said of his brother's remarks. There's nothing here. Some of it was tongue-in-cheek, Carr said. The other was specific instructions. No, Price answered. It wasn't all a joke, Carr said. Okay, but no, Price answered. Okay, thank you, sir, Carr said. In a Wednesday afternoon, Georgia Deputy Secretary of State, I guess the A doesn't belong here. In Wednesday afternoon, Georgia's Deputy Secretary of State, Jordan Fuchs, confirmed the office would be exploring the felony charges tied to fraudulent voter registration in Georgia. For weeks, Georgia officials have warned that registering to vote with no attempt to stay in Georgia can be punishable by a felony charge that can carry up to a 10-year sentence and a $100,000 fine. Now, that's a good way to get you to stay in Georgia. Wouldn't that be interesting to get caught on that, sentenced to prison in Georgia? You're there for 10 years. From prison, you sue and say this whole conviction is wrong because obviously I did stay in Georgia after all. Anyway, an unnecessary dig at everybody else in this one. So here Fuchs, trying to do the right thing, says the wrong thing. This isn't California. We actually investigate and seek to prosecute individuals who try to vote here illegally. You get where this a-hole is coming from now. Our system is built to prevent this behavior. We will seek to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. I love it, right? We're not like California where those Democrats let all those illegal immigrants vote, et cetera, et cetera. We here in Georgia, we uphold the law, and you can prove it by showing you that every time we catch somebody, they turn out to be Republicans, so we're on the up and up. All right, well, I'm glad they better put this guy away after a remark like that. Anyway, Carr reached out to the Bay County GOP to see if the group advised members that Price was under investigation and his suggestions regarding temporary moves to vote is illegal. As of airtime Wednesday, Channel 2 has not received a response. So I guess if you're listening in Bay County, Florida, don't do it. You'll get arrested. David Price is an idiot, and you shouldn't follow his advice. Okay, so that's kind of a big deal. Let's see, other things to catch up on. There are many. Let me get to another couple of stories here, but just take a break here and take a look. I have some notes here to myself. Two things I need to do. One, I wanted to acknowledge some additional contributors who didn't have their names read on the air for various reasons. One was that one of them was my mom. Thanks, Mom. And I don't know. I mean, and I think it led to the other one too, and the other of them was one of my brothers who I thought, well, now if I make a big deal out of this thing, do I want to put their names out there? Because what if crazy people who hate us start listening to the radio show and investigate and see if they can I don't know. Well, I can tell you this, they would have an easier time probably finding my mom. So we'll just say thanks, Mom, to that one. And Mom knows who she is. And my brother, Mark, thank you very much. It'll be harder to track you down because you move a lot. So there's that. But Mark had contributed a while ago through the Cash app. And when I was writing out the list of everybody's names, I saw it and I kind of I wrote it on a different part of the paper, to give out some special different recognition. And then I gave special no recognition. And that's the opposite of what I meant to do. But there you go. And so that's also a good thing, by the way. You can cure problems if you text me during the show and interrupt things and things get all messed up. You can just send money, I suppose, and cure that. So thank you to my family members who have joined in the contribution. And, as I'm saying it, I feel like my brother Lou also at some point might have used the Cash app to send money, or maybe PayPal to send money. And I'm thinking it was a couple of years ago, and that maybe the records didn't go back far enough for me to find his name. And I hope I haven't glossed over anybody else. And if Bill Gates, let's say, if you're listening, let's say you want to stay anonymous and give $1 billion, like that would be okay too. I could make arrangements for that. And I guess going forward, if you prefer to stay anonymous for whatever reason, or you have a different way of having prefer a different way of having your name mentioned on here, please do make a note of it if you can. I had a couple other people actually ask, what's the preferred method? There's no necessarily preferred method. I probably should have been doing some research looking at like which service charges the lowest fees, either to you or to me. I don't think they charge you any fees, but I didn't do that because I was really just opening up all the doors I could to make it as convenient as possible for people to contribute, and I didn't really care that much about the fees. It was all for you, I guess is one way of looking at it. But it's true there are some fees, and I should check into those things. But Patreon, I will say, is the most organized of the bunch in terms of being a donation platform, and gives you the most opportunity to communicate through their own system and send emails and notes and comments and questions, et cetera, et cetera. And so they would be the one that would be, say, most equipped for you to send a note that would get noticed that says, this is how I pronounce my name, or I prefer to remain anonymous, or I want you to credit me as Bill Gates, or whatever it is you have to say. So my recommendation there, Patreon, and it also keeps, I think the monthly recurring contribution thing it's nice, it's helpful, it sustains things, it keeps everything on an even keel, and in case, as long as that's your intention to do, it takes all the trouble out of it and makes it easy to do. So we thank you once again, everybody who has contributed. Also, a note here that I keep skipping over, or not skipping over, but just forgetting to do because there's so many stories. And so today I'll forget one of the stories in favor of this reminder. Scott Anderson's fantastic summations of everything that we do every day here that include all the links to all of the stories that Greg mentions, links to all the stories that I mention, even just the random tweets usually that I mention, just so, that's from old blogging habit to let you verify the stories as true or share them with other people or check them out for yourselves or offer your own critique on them. But it's a lot of work, and I hated doing it. And I thank Scott for stepping in to take over that task. But it's more than just that. It's more than just compiling the links. I could give you a list of the links, but he constructs a whole narrative of what happened on the show. And sometimes, by the way, gives a real interesting twist to it by leaving some mystery, for instance, about what got said. And you say, well, what the hell could that be all about? And click on the link and see what the story is. But now I got to listen to the show and see how they put that. But in addition to that, it's just a great resource generally, not only to keep up with the show and what got said on it, but sort of, I don't know, he kind of can capture the headspace where the show exists. And there are items sometimes that happen, sometimes after the show, sometimes during the show, but we miss it. Sometimes connections that seem obvious and that yet don't get made for whatever reason, even though I know I have the resource or the link there somewhere to make that connection, and Scott will make it. There's more to it than just a summary of what happened, really, is my point, in each of these things. There's additional, I guess you would call it if it was a film, additional bonus footage. There are bonus resources embedded in almost every one of the daily summaries, and you should look for them and then look for the little extra Easter eggs that Scott sometimes provides. And if you don't know exactly where to go to find it for whatever reason, and I think it's more complicated now that they've redesigned Daily Kos, the front page. If you're using the new design, it's not as easily found. On the old design, if you're still stuck there, I still stay there. I default to that. But, you go to the menu, the drop-down menu under News at Daily Kos. There is a radio section there, and that's us. And it'll take you there. And although we have technically separated from the Daily Kos umbrella, one of the things that was technically impossible to do was to change the base root URL of the radio show page on Daily Kos. But this is where you would go to find those summations at Daily Kos. DailyKos.com, obviously, /blogs, just as you would for any group page. So DailyKos.com /blogs /Daily Kos Radio. How we used to identify ourselves. The URL still has it. Another place you can go, of course, you can find them at Libsyn. I put up all of the summations there as well, and you can find our prefab blog format there at kagrox.libsyn, Libsyn, Liberated Syndication. kagrox.libsyn.com will take you to a very old school looking blog formatted version of what's basically the show archives. Each podcast is connected there, and you can click on it and click through to hear the podcast, and all of those fantastic summaries are available there too, unless, of course, I forgot to, and there are some days that I just skip over it entirely, and every once in a while I go combing through looking for blank spaces. But generally speaking, they're all there as well. So thanks again, not only for taking over that chore to Scott, but extra plug for the extra work that Scott does to make these summations more than just summations and more than just rote recitation of what happened, but an entertaining glimpse of what happened and an informative one as well. So I think I want you to pay some additional attention to those things, and it'll help you keep connected with the show, and also a good way to look back and say, which day was it that we did that thing? You'll find it that way too. All right. I think that takes care of the tasks I've been meaning to take care of. Now for the surprises that I didn't even know I was going to get to. A couple other additional stories. What can I squeeze in before things go? One, I'll give you this update. I know I've been ranting and raving for some time now about where the hell is this Regeneron drug that Trump promised to give everybody for free. There's actual progress on that. Not that he's been saving many lives on that front. We're over 60,000 people lost since he promised it. And quite honestly, that's something for which I can't believe people are willing to forgive him. But the New York Times reports late in November, on November 21st, saying FDA grants emergency authorization, finally, of the antibody treatment given to Trump. Just recall, though, that in his stupid video, which was filmed on October 8th, that he was going to immediately order everybody to get this thing for free. But, of course, there was no order. It was just he was hoping that the FDA emergency authorization would come through immediately. And I guess the answer to how immediate is 2 months, essentially. So it was, basically 2 months. So from October 8th, when he said it was going to be immediate, to November 21st, and they still haven't overcome the production problem. They've authorized its use. It's just nobody has got it, and nobody's got enough of it. And by the way, as it turns out, it is effective for only the most narrow and a very stupidly narrow slice of COVID patients. Get this, it's essentially effective only for people in super early stages of COVID infection, preferably, they say, those who are early enough in it that they have not yet been hospitalized, and in many cases, perhaps not even yet been tested. So, and preferably they are pre-symptomatic as well. So basically, by the time you figure out you need the thing, you are basically now ineligible for getting the thing. So not much of a cure, honestly. It really only nets that narrow slice of the population who are being constantly tested for fear of their getting the disease, and who can be then helicoptered to a hospital where you're not supposed to be when you get the thing, even though that's where they're distributing the thing to. And so that creates a bit of a problem too. They gave it all out to hospitals, except they really want to use it on people who aren't in hospitals. So genius move there. I just thought I would bring you up to speed on that one. And let's see, we'll cram in one or two other bits here. We'll just acknowledge the Talking Points memo, folks, for the good language in their headline about Trumpist lawyer Lynn Wood. Put this way, pro-coup Trumpist lawyer Lynn Wood seems to be legit bonkers. We've been waiting for headlines like that. Read up on that story to find out exactly why. And let me throw in this next piece here that is extraordinarily concerning. You remember that I read to you, was it yesterday, the story of the full-page ad in the Washington Times calling for suspension of the Constitution and imposition of martial law because freedom. Well, that bonkers piece went on to say that there was an insurrection, that we should use the Insurrection Act in order to do this because Antifa and Black Lives Matter terrorists were threatening mass harm all across the country, and how stupid and crazy and outlandish and out of touch that position was. I want to bring this one to your attention. AP reporting this one, Ryan J. Foley, police guide that calls BLM a terrorist group draws outrage, draws it correctly. Dateline, Iowa City, a prominent law enforcement training group is promoting a lengthy research document riddled with falsehoods and conspiracies that urges local police to treat Black Lives Matter activists as terrorists, plotting a violent revolution. The document is distributed by the International Law Enforcement Educators and Trainers Association and contains misinformation and inflammatory rhetoric that could incite officers against protesters and people of color generally, critics said. It alleges Black Lives Matter and Antifa, when you know who they are, we won't bother with their description of it, are, quote, revolutionary movements whose aims are to overthrow the U.S. government, and claims that they are planning, quote, extreme violence. Now, there's much more to the story, and I think I'll probably even return to it tomorrow. But of course, you hear the music that tells us we're basically out of time for this one. I just wanted to bring this to your attention because it's too important to let it slide. I think I'll give it more attention later in the week. But keep this in mind, please. I don't know how big of an organization this is. I don't know how influential an organization this is. But I just wanted to bring to your attention, police, I guess, around the country, if this policy goes into effect, will be, or the paper goes into wide circulation, will be trained to view Black Lives Matter protesters and, I guess, Antifa, wherever they think they can find them, as terrorists plotting the overthrow of the federal government. That, in other words, that same bonkers sentiment that was captured in that idiotic full-page ad from the We the People convention nut bars is how cops are being trained around the country. But don't defund them. Give them more money so that they can implement this stupid policy. In case you were wondering what was the problem with our police departments, this is part of it. This is a long-standing problem. They were trained this way about Islam and Muslims in general many years ago. We objected rightly to that. This needs objection too.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
And I think I put it too mildly. It does need objection to, but basically people who put it out need to be arrested under the Insurgency Act. I guess we can do that one. Anyway, stay tuned now, please, for Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. There's so much more we didn't get to, so many other perspectives that he'll bring you, and we don't have time for. Stay tuned.